Good afternoon. I'm here today to make an important announcement about yet another action that we are taking with partners across the nation to stand up yet again to actions by the Trump administration that are unconstitutional and violate federal law. This will be actually the third lawsuit in which our office has been active in challenging the administration's efforts to undermine a full, fair, and complete census. But first, some background. The census determines, as we know, who gets political representation and billions of dollars across the United States. Those dollars are allocated based on census counts for federal funding for key services like transportation or education or healthcare. Undercounted jurisdictions, then, stand to lose political representation and stand to lose billions of dollars. A full, fair, and complete count is especially important to all of us here in Los Angeles. The city is located in the county in the United States that is considered the hardest to count. More than half of LA's residents live in what are called hard-to-count census tracts. Renters are more transient and harder to count, and half of LA households are occupied by renters. The census now relies on the internet, but more than 20% of LA residents don't have access to broadband internet. Non-English speaking households are harder to count, and nearly a quarter of LA's residents don't have English language proficiency. So it's not surprising that the city's self-response rate, as of a few days ago, was only 53.8%. That's way below the state average, which is now 65%, and well below where LA ended up in the last census, which was a self-response rate of 68%. In light of all those facts, though, and this is what our lawsuit is about, earlier this month, in the midst of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, the Census Bureau suddenly decided to reverse course and curtail its efforts to achieve a full, fair, and complete count. So today, I'm announcing that we're suing the Trump administration to block it from unconstitutionally abandoning a plan to obtain an accurate census count in the midst of a devastating pandemic. From political representation to crucial federal funding, every LA resident has so much that is riding on having an accurate census count. The administration's abrupt and inexplicable turnaround, and let me say, we asked the administration for an explanation by letter. I sent a letter and received no response at all, is also unlawful. And that reversal could harm LA residents for the next decade. It would also harm all Americans in hard-to-count locations across the United States. The decision by this administration to curtail its previous efforts must not stand. Let me explain a little bit more about what's at stake. You know, the administration's decision this month is almost certain to assure a severe undercount, which, by the way, violates the Constitution. Federal law now requires typically that the Census Bureau report its count to the president by the end of the year, by December 31st. But the COVID-19 pandemic has made this a year like no other, and the Census Bureau recognized the pandemic's impact. And so expert staff at the Census Bureau acted this April to extend that reporting deadline from December until next April. It delayed the counting process. It shifted the time frame for conducting and completing what's called data collection, which is like door knocking, for example. It increased the time for data collection. It crucially preserved, even as it pushed back some of those time frames, it preserved the amount of time necessary to do that work properly at each step of the way. In other words, the COVID-19 plan that the Bureau expert staff had in place in April was designed to get us the full, fair, and complete count that we in Los Angeles and all of us across the nation not only need, but are constitutionally entitled to expect. So it was extraordinary that earlier this month, the Trump administration abruptly changed course. It said it would compress a planned 8.5-month process to 4.5 months. It would limit outreach in the field. It would limit and cut self-reporting time, despite the fact that cities like Los Angeles had been relying on the earlier time frames and publicized the earlier time frames that abruptly now have been cut back by the Bureau. Let's call the Bureau's plan the Rush Plan. The Rush Plan would give the Bureau just more than 6 weeks to complete enumeration of roughly half of the population here in Los Angeles in the midst of that pandemic. This is all to achieve a deadline that the administration, including the president, has been saying for months they can't meet. LA could lose millions and millions of dollars. We could lose political representation. We could have inaccurate data on which to base our local redistricting efforts. So the Rush Plan is unconstitutional. The Rush Plan violates federal law. The Rush Plan is a recipe for a severe undercount with repercussions that will last for years. That's why there are 4 former U.S. Census directors, Republican, who've served in Republican and Democratic administrations, who issued a statement that said that the compressed timeframes of the Rush Plan would result in, and I'm quoting here, in seriously incomplete enumeration in many areas across the country. Fortunately, there is a solution here. Our lawsuit, in which we have joined with cities like Salinas and San Jose and counties like Harris County, Texas, and King County in Washington, and widely respected national organizations, the National Urban League, the League of Women Voters, the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, all of us have joined together. And we propose a simple solution. We ask the court to prevent the administration from cutting operations short through its Rush Plan, and that the court allow the Bureau to pursue its COVID-19 plan that its expert staff had previously put in place to respond to the pandemic. In short, we ask that the court allow the Bureau to fulfill its constitutional obligations. We ask that the court require the Bureau put aside the Rush Plan in favor of the plan it had in place after the pandemic took hold. I want to thank our staff, who have been absolutely extraordinary, literally working night and day to be sure that this lawsuit could be filed, along with our wonderful partners across the country. In particular, I want to thank Kate Keneally, Mike Dundas, and Danielle Goldstein, who are just wonderful, extraordinary public servants. And while I'm thanking people, I also would like to thank our interpreter, Susan Pacheco, who gets to thank herself today. And of course, I want to thank our friends at Channel 35 LA City View. Let me say a few words in Spanish, and then I'll be happy to take questions from members of the press who will be directing their questions to Rob, who will then recite them to me. Ahora en español. Los intereses del gobierno federal de acelerar el conteo del censo representan una grave amenaza para todas las funciones vitales que dependen de los datos del censo. Las ciudades, condados y estados que no se contabilicen correctamente perderán representación en el Congreso y decenas de millones de dólares en financiamiento. y las comunidades de color. Perderán derechos políticos fundamentales y servicios vitales. Es por eso que hoy mi oficina está demandando a la administración de Trump para que detengan su plan de acerramiento y que en cambio lo haga bien. Rob, questions?
Yes, a question from Claudia at KNX News Radio 1070. First, do you think cutting the census short was a racist decision?
Well, here's what I think. We know that hard-to-count communities, census tracts, cities, states, counties, are comprised largely of communities of color. We know that the Rush Plan is going to make it more difficult to fully count people in hard-to-count communities. So we know that the effect of the Rush Plan is going to fall particularly hard on communities of color in Los Angeles and across the United States. We also know that it's going to have, if it's allowed to stay in place, a huge partisan political impact when it comes to where political representation lies. So whether by intent or effect, the Rush Plan is going to have a particularly harsh impact on communities of color when it comes to the dollars those communities receive for key services and when it comes to political representation.
Second question from Claudia at KNX, and this regarding a separate issue.
Sure.
The, quote, Legal Aid Foundation claims that the city has violated a preliminary injunction by resuming, quote, comprehensive encampment cleanups, sweeps, and wants LA held in contempt. Your response?
So I understand that there was a court filing. I don't know that we've been served. I haven't seen the court filing, so I can't comment further at this juncture.
All right, that concludes our questioning.
Okay, very good. Well, I want to thank again my staff, again, Kate Keneally, Mike Dundas, Danielle Goldstein. I want to thank our extraordinary partners across the country who have joined us in this crucial litigation. I want to underscore to all who are on this call that it's essential that we get a full, complete, and fair count. We're going to do everything we can here in Los Angeles to get the word out to achieve that. But most importantly, this lawsuit needs to succeed in order for all of us in this nation to have the correct count to which we are constitutionally entitled. Thank you very much.